Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another ChinWag with me, Richard Vobes. Very nice of you to join me on the 19th of August 2022. Yesterday, I recorded the ChinWag. I also record something called The Naked Englishman, which is a podcast that I do every day. It's an audio podcast, not a video podcast. I've been doing that since 2006, and there's over, I don't know what there is, something like 3,000 of the bloody things, which records my life. Anyway, it's a very raw sort of thing, a version of the Chin Chat or Chin Wag or what do we call this? But it's in audio form, and it's very basic, but it tells a story. Anyway, I recorded that in the mornings, and then I record the Chin Wag, and as you now know. And then I sat down, had a cup of coffee, and I thought, I feel incredibly listless. I feel incredibly weak. What is going on? Have I got a virus? Is there something wrong with me? Have I got ME? I couldn't see or feel any actual symptoms. It was as if somebody or some strange black dark being had ripped from the interior of me all my energy, and I just felt as if I had no life whatsoever. And I flopped down on the sofa, thinking, "What am I doing with myself? I've got a number of things I want to do, but I had no motivation at all." And it wasn't just sort of a mental aberration. This was a physical aberration. I really felt as if I could not do anything, as if I'd been hit by a bus. Without any damage, but just... And I was chatting to a friend, and he said, well, you can have a day off, if you're ill, if you're not well, you can have a day off. And I thought, yeah, okay, I could do that, but I feel bad having a day. I'm somebody who loves... I'm very self-motivated. You have to be self-motivated to run a YouTube channel, or indeed several YouTube channels, and to record podcasts and things, because you wake up some mornings... and you can easily go, do you know what, I can't be bothered. But if you've got a job and your employer is going to have strict words with you when you get to work, you, of course, that's enough motivation. I've got to go in. If I don't go in, I don't get paid, or I'll get shouted at. I can't find an excuse, or I can't have another sicky day. But when you work for yourself... You've got to have clear motivation to get up, because otherwise you could just go, do you know what, I can't be bothered today. I just have to take it easy today. I'm not going to make a video. I'm not going to do anything. And it would be very easy. But unfortunately, if you do that, of course, you don't get paid. Now, I've been self-employed for most of my life, and not just doing YouTube, but also doing other things in the corporate entertainment world, in the corporate video world, and also in television. And unless you're highly motivated to get up off your backside and go and do stuff, you can't get things off the ground, you can't go and earn money. And if I didn't turn up at gigs when I was as an entertainer, then you wouldn't get paid. It was as simple as that. And so that motivation makes you work, even if you're doing stuff which you think, well, I don't know if I'm going to make any money out of this, but I'm going to give it a try, which is what a lot of YouTube channeling stuff is in my case. You think, well, I'm going to give this 5 years, or I'm going to give this 10 years, as I did with the Bald Explorer. Is it going to be worthwhile doing? And you do it day after day after day after day. You need the motivation. Anyway, the point of all of that is to say that there comes a point when you're ill that I can't work. And I just find that my motivation is going. And as much as my willpower is saying, come on, this isn't right, get up. There's no symptoms. Your arm isn't bleeding. Your head hasn't fallen off. Your legs are still attached. Why are you feeling so lethargic, so pathetic that you can barely get off the sofa? What's going on? By the way, I'm feeling absolutely fine today. It wore off by mid-afternoon. I took a stroll down to the seaside where I live and round the pier, and I saw a friend of mine who runs a spectacle shop and doing spectacles, and so I was looking at some new glasses, because I've actually snapped them and I've glued it with super glue, but they won't hold like that forever, and so I need another pair. Anyway, so I went in. I wanted to go and see him and organise that, and I started to feel about 75, 80% better, and I walked around the pier and I came back, and I was eating. My appetite hadn't gone, and I was eating because I thought, well, maybe I'm just not eating the right kind of foods. Maybe I've had some lousy food. Maybe something has, I don't know what it was. Maybe it was a sort of temporary virus that was flowing by. It's gone. I'm back to normal. I'm back to normal. It was a 12-hour sort of, I don't know, something. Anyway, the point is, when I was unable to do anything, or felt unable, or felt in this fog, I was guilty. I felt incredibly guilty that I could not get off my backside and do stuff. Taking time off, for me, I always feel guilty. Now, I don't know whether it's a Catholic work ethic or a Protestant work ethic, whatever whatever the phrase is. But I'm somebody, I think because I'm self-motivated, that if I take time off, I feel bad. I feel guilty. I feel I ought to be doing it. Now, whether that's something that's come from my childhood, I think possibly it has. Maybe because my dad was self-employed and ran his own business, and that my mum, for a long time after my parents separated, brought us up. My dad had left home and abandoned his 2 children because he was arguing with his wife. Had left us with an alcoholic. My mother was an alcoholic, which back in the 70s, people would do that and not bat an eye. You could leave your 2 children with a very bad alcoholic who would abuse the children verbally, not physically, and that's what happened to me. But that was okay back then. But she was also, apart from being this alcoholic, she also never shirked work. She would take any job because she had to. And her background, she'd been an orphan, treated terribly, which is probably why she hit the bottle in the end, because of what happened to her and the hardships of life. And she did, it was a very strange childhood, and I remember it, in different ways, but I can see the logic of it, that she had been brought up with this abuse from the nuns, from nuns in the nunnery that she had been brought up in as an orphan back in the 1930s, and the sort of terrible things that they did, which affected her and made her feel useless. She then gets married, and the marriage breaks down, and she starts to feel useless again. She takes to the bottle, as so many people do when they feel bad, as a bit of solace, and becomes addicted to it, finds that she's got an addictive personality. But she also had this determination to ensure that she always provided for her children, even though she drank and then turned into a Mr. Jekyll character, a Mr. Hyde character, and was unaware of the abuse that she gave her children, verbally, not physically, as I say, which affected both my sister and me in our formative years. However, we have, fortunately, both of us have managed to break that spell, although we still hold inside us that kernel of abuse, of feeling inadequate and unable to do stuff. And I think through all of that, I feel incredibly guilty if I am not getting up and working, even though I feel ill. I will not take time off if I feel ill unless I physically cannot move. And it's been rare times that's happened, but mostly I still recorded my podcast. I still recorded the ChinWag yesterday, but I could not get motivated to put together a video, although I did do some editing and some other bits and pieces around the house and tidying up, and I kept myself going, although I did take some naps when I couldn't really cope. And my question today to you is to elicit responses, is do you ever feel guilty if you take time off work? I was told by a friend, would have the day off and just forget about it, get over it and I find I can't do that. Now, it's not laudable. It may be stupid. It may be absolutely stupid that the thing you need to do is your body is saying you need to rest, mate, go to bed for the day. And I find that difficult to do. But are you somebody who is the same? Do you have that? Maybe it's just the fact that you have too many responsibilities. And in this day and age, with the cost of living crisis and everything else that we seem to have pushed on us and the stresses and stuff, that people can't take time off. Even though we've had 2 years where we're all locked up saying, well, if you've got the disease of this virulent thing that was going around, then you've got to stay at home. And maybe now people are much more open to that, because they had to be open to it because we were mandated to stay at home and not go anywhere if we had this thing. And now if people get ill, I wonder if people by default go, oh, well, I can't be bothered to go in, I'll just say I'm ill. And if nobody believes me, I'll just give it the name that we called it a couple of years ago, that we were all terrified of, that we were given some special solution into our arms to supposedly help us, which actually may not be the best thing that ever happened to anybody in their lives anyway, but that's a different story. So I want to know, do you feel guilty when you can't work, when you're feeling rough, or you can't do duties around the house, or you can't do anything? Or do you just embrace it and say, do you know what, I feel a bit crap. I'm actually going to just take the time off. I'm going to get over it. And actually, it's the best thing I can do. And maybe that is the right way. I'm not saying it isn't. Maybe it is the right thing to say, look, I will catch up with my work. It isn't a problem. I will catch up with it, and I will go and just get my own health back into full steam, because if I'm not healthy, how can I get my work and look after other people? And I do agree with that. We've got to look after ourselves first, because we can't do other stuff if we're not 100%. But all I'm saying is, although I was taking these naps and taking time out from the things I wanted to do, and I was trying to do other stuff, I felt just so bad about myself and so guilty. So I'm interested to know, do you go through that, or do you just embrace it and say, well, tomorrow's another day? Be interested to know. Let me know. Meanwhile, let's have a look at some of the comments that have come in regarding some of the other subjects that we've been talking about this week. Cyclists and school grades particularly seem to be a hot topic at the moment. So let us go with cyclists here. Don't give the government any more ideas for taxation, says Heidel 308. Which, of course, we don't want the government to continually tax us for everything. And maybe it could be free. Maybe the number plate issue you don't have to pay for it. It's just that you have to apply for it. It wouldn't have to, obviously then there'd be some bureaucratic charges, I suppose, to say, well, in order for somebody somewhere in an office to go, your number is BCG1049F, whatever, it's going to cost something, so therefore we have to pay for it. So yes, I agree, we don't want to be taxed any more than necessary, but if it's very minimal, I have a drone, and I fly the drone, and it costs me £10 a year. It was £9, it's gone up to £10 a year. And basically all I get for that is a number I'm on a list. So if somebody challenges me and says, oh, have you got a license for that? I can say yes, and here's my license number. It costs £10 a year. It's not. It probably makes a fortune for the CAA with everybody who've got drones, and if you did the same for bicycles, it would probably make a bit of money for them. It's true, but £10 a year. You may argue that if you've got a family and of say 3 kids and they've all got bikes, that's 30 quid a year. That might be too much. Well, I think the same you could certainly organise it to say, well, look, if it's all on the same family, whether it's 10 bikes or 100 bikes, which would be very unusual, it's the same fee. I think that would be fair, don't you? Wouldn't that not be fair? Say, look, it's the one price per family. And then you say, well, wait a minute, there's only one of me and I'm paying £10, and there's 5 of them and they're paying the same. Whatever system you come up with, there's always going to be some element of unfairness, isn't there? So it is very difficult, and people get sort of very worked up. Ingram Cars say, do people, this is regarding school grades, do people develop at different times? So people do. He says people do, not do people. Sorry, it's funny, if you read the same sentence and transpose a word the wrong way around, you can see how easy it is to make it wrong. People do develop at different times. I was in the lowest group for maths throughout the school. remedial, I think they call it. When collecting my grades, I remember rushing up to the maths teacher, Mr. Hearn, and he asked how I'd done, and I said to him, unravelling my piece of paper with the results on, I think they've made a mistake. They've put grade 1 CSE, equivalent to an O-level. With a huge smile on his face, I will never forget what he said next. No, Simon, you've done it. You've done it well. No, Simon, you've done it. Well done. Regardless of grades, I have done and still do what I have always dreamed of doing, although I was split between the motor trade or farming. Oh, that's interesting. My parents disappointed. I rejected a placement at Plumpton Agricultural College. Still wish I could do both. Ah, yes, we all wish that we could do more than one thing, don't we? Yeah, that's interesting. Anthony Conti says, I agree with your idea. I was always a poor student and was lucky to graduate from high school in 1962, aged 19. Nearly immediately, I landed a job as a ship's purser trainee with a Liverpool-based cargo company sailing to South America and Europe. Once ashore, I worked shifts boarding vessels at the Panama Canal for this same firm. I eventually got promoted and became the general manager. The rug got pulled out from under my feet in 1985 when a Scandinavian group purchased the agency and I was paid off. Incredibly, at 42, I landed a job with the US federal government as a news monitor / translator, from where I retired in 2005 after 20 years of service. This interesting job entailed shifts and weekend work. I was then rehired as an independent contractor and worked from home until 2019. Now I spend time reading and watching my beloved England, thanks to you, Richard, Mark English, John Rogers, and others. Well, that's very kind of you. And an interesting story about that in terms of how, it doesn't make much difference what your school grades are. Your career can go down all sorts of amazing paths. I think mostly the thing that should be taught at school is optimism and positive thinking and presenting yourself and things like that, things that will do you good stead. Because if you push out an optimistic, positive attitude and smile and dress as smartly as you can and be as endearing to the person and helpful and all those sort of things, I think people will like you. It's all about, ultimately whether people like you. And if they like you, then you'll do well. If people don't like you, if you don't have some social intercourse with people and unfamiliar, if you're kept in your bedrooms just looking at your computer and hiding away, your chances must surely be reduced. It's got to be common sense, hasn't it? Alan Evans says the competition for a decent job these days is so fierce. I don't envy young people the challenges they face, especially with the housing costs, and that is so true. It is a shame. Why is it that we have this fierce competition? Is it because the competition is no longer just on a national level, but global? That we are competing against people who are coming from different countries, which on one level seems to be incredibly unfair. Although the companies may argue, but we want the best people, and if they are around the other side of the world and we have to bring them in, so be it. But what does that do for the nation? Why can we not try and bring up our own nation? Lift people up instead of just cast people off. That seems to be a very horrible way to treat a community of people who already live here and want to get on and contribute to the overall nation. I don't understand. Louise Lage says, different countries have different basic childhood education. Finland and Denmark have the highest rates of literacy and employment because their schooling is free, with free meals too, from preschool to post-secondary. It's structured towards critical thinking and problem solving, and they have no standardized testing. Oh, that's interesting. Hadn't thought about that. A good education is very important to get ahead these days and compete in the workforce. That and travel, which broadens and benefits one's perspectives on other people's cultures and countries. We don't have to worry about other people's cultures and countries because they're all coming to your own house now, aren't they? That's the difference. And some of us are being forced to accept other people's cultures and countries, or their traditions and things, whether we like it or not, in our own country. And we're not allowed to promote our own culture and countries' traditions anymore, which seems to be a thing. It's quite a long piece, but thank you very much for that. The Ethereal Cat says every bicycle, talking about bicycles now, has a serial number on it. I can't say that mine has a serial number on it. Maybe that's a fairly recent thing. Recording that protects you if it's stolen and recovered. I know there was a sort of a move to have it put on. You could have your postcode put on and your initials or something like that. License plate can be removed, yes, but it could be removed, but not if it was engraved. That's what I was thinking. Serial numbers can be ground off. Well, I suppose that's true. So surely that's the same with the bicycle has a serial number on it. Surely that could be ground off. Carrying your ID when bicycle identifies you in case of accidents. Yes, that's true, but you don't necessarily then have to carry an ID, and we don't want a society in which you have to carry an ID card. The beauty is that you wouldn't. And if you, yes, number plates and things can be removed, but if they are removed, surely that makes you suddenly questionable by police and people like that who would be enforcing this. Of course, you may then argue, how the hell do you enforce the millions of bicycles that have a number plate on it? And maybe you can't, but maybe just by the act of putting on that the majority of people would follow, because the majority of people do want to conform to a society and make it work, that the ones that don't will stand out much easier to see. I don't know what the answer is. Carrying your ID, yes, it said that. This is what I mean by being responsible. No need for license plates, just people taking responsibility for themselves. And I agree that most people probably would be responsible. But you, again, as I said yesterday, you only have to look around. There are plenty of irresponsible people. And they're going to be the ones that, yes, I agree, they would be the ones that remove the number plate. So, yes, I am with you. I understand what you're saying. It's just, and we don't want to get into a military-style force in which every single thing has to be absolutely enforced on the threat of death or something, or imprisonment and all of that, or huge heavy fines. I get that. We just want society to be cohesive and to really just get on for the common good. That's, in my mind, that's how it should work. I'm certainly not into sort of some form of weird martial law where you must do this or you're taken up against the wall and shot. That's an extreme example, of course. Jean Lima says schools near where I live, teach children. Schools near where I live teach children to cycle safely on the road as part of the cycle proficiency certificate. Yes, and I did that in the 70s when I was a kid. I doubt they do this in a busy city, though. Would be interesting to know if anyone knows if this happens in their city. Well, there we are. Let's ask the question and see what happens. Leo Pold says, on the subject of bikes, I think the government should be free to legislate on everything that is made by industry, but nothing that existed before industry. So cars and bikes, yes, but horses and carts, no. Well, that's an interesting thing. And presumably carts are made by an industry, even if it is a solo person working in a cart shed. And horses presumably are trained to obey instruction. So I'm curious on that. He goes on with another one regarding school grades. He says, I learned more after leaving school. Yup, really. School was awful, and I had to educate myself to get into university later. I Couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. Not because I wasn't interested in learning at school. I was an avid reader, but because the environment at secondary school was hell on earth. Yes, and my secondary school was exactly the same. I mean, it was full of bullies, and I used to get punched for no apparent reason. Not that I could see, but maybe I was just ugly. Maybe I was just a wimp, and probably still am. I'm probably, just a punch bag. I was used, by the way, just to add this, but a bunch of kids got hold of me once in my first year at secondary school and used me as a battering ram against the school, but not against a door where I may have had a vague chance of, bashing opening the door, as they got hold of me and used me like a battering ram horizontally with my head bashing against the obstacle. Not against the door, no, against a brick wall in which I actually had no chance of knocking the blocks out of. It was knocking my block. Maybe that's why I'm a bit deranged and mad and stupid and crazy. I don't know. Maybe that's why I went bald. But that's what happened. It wasn't a pleasant experience at all. But yes, it was hell on earth, and I don't really remember learning very much at school. And I agree. But I think the thing that schools should try and do more than anything else is to teach us how to be interested. Because when you're interested in something, you're a sponge. You just learn. And if a teacher can create interest in their subject by not even attempting to teach stuff about it, but just getting us to be interesting. There's some lessons that I had. Geography, for example, was the most boring lesson I can possibly imagine at school, because the teacher was telling us about Canadian crop cycles and things like that. I had no real concept of Canada when I was at secondary school. I knew there was a farm at the back of my house, but we were talking about Canadian crop quotas and things like that. And she was just writing it on a blackboard, and we just had to copy it down as if that were... And we were just so disinterested with it. At school, I was interested in filmmaking, and I used to get the magazine Filmmaker and Movie Maker, and I knew about editing, cutting and splicing Super 8 film and all that sort of stuff, because that was my interest, and I was a sponge and learnt all about that. You look at kids on computer games who know about guns. It's not because they're particularly interested in guns per se, but in a computer game, the guns were sort of part of the vocabulary of the game. And if you had a bigger gun, and it could do more damage, and how many rounds. And I look at my kids when they were growing up, and they were playing these shoot 'em up games, and I was horrified that they knew so much about guns. But I realized that they enjoyed playing these games so much, they would learn about things that were connected to the games, because they were sponges. They just knew it because they were interested. And I feel that that's what teachers should be doing. If you've got a geography lesson and you're in there, you should be teaching them the wonders of the world, of the different places and the different cultures and the different societies, and where people, not just the world, but also in your locality, the geography of your own, where your house is in relation to this, and perhaps a little bit about the roads and stuff, but not teaching them so they copy it down or anything, but getting them to ask questions, getting them to go, oh, I wonder why that is. Why do you suppose the sweet shop is in this road where all these other houses? Where do you suppose people go and buy their stuff? And get the kids to sort of be inquisitive and interested. Because once you've done that, the job is done for you. Once you can get an inquiring mind, which, let's face it, all kids have an inquiring mind. They're born and they're looking around and trying to make headway in the world and trying to work out things. And all you've got to do is harness that, which may not be the easiest thing when they're starting to get into their late 9s and 10s and then their early teens, because puberty and all those sort of things are coming in. But even so, if you can just harness the inquisitive nature, the natural, innate, inquisitive nature, kids will learn. They will. And you just teach them how to continually want to learn, and they'll learn anything. That, to me, is the secret of it all. Nick O'Lass says it takes 10 years for cyclists to kill the same number of people as motorists do in 4 days. All this hate directed towards cyclists isn't on. So I'm not sure. I mean, I haven't killed anyone as a motorist, by the way, should point out. I've been driving since I was 17, and I've not killed anyone. So I'm not quite sure how that works. And I wouldn't really want to set cyclists up to spend 10 years going around trying to kill people as well. But I take what you're trying to say. I take the point that there is a hatred towards cyclists. We've all got to share the road. And all I'm saying is that if we're all sharing the same road, then maybe the same rules should apply to all of us. That cyclists shouldn't go through the red lights. That cyclists should have a number plate or some system that they can be identified, just as a road user, a car user would be. That's all I'm saying. I'm just saying that cyclists ought to have, just as road users, the same strict conditions, because we have so many more people on the roads. And it's not because we want to get particularly heavy with cyclists as a group of people. It's just that it makes sense that we all have the same system. That's, I think, all I'm saying. And now I'm not calling that hatred towards cyclists by any means. And because I also ride a bike as well, and I would be more than happy to have the same rules, so that, you know, it would be nice to be much freer, as in on a car, and just say, do you know what, I'm going to take a shortcut across this field instead of having to go round the gyratory. But we all accept that we can't do that anymore, that we have to abide by certain rules. Sean's Gardening World says, I have a Bachelor of Science with honours in professional broadcast techniques and documentary production. Not that it's done me any good, he says. I hear you can now study YouTube in some American universities. I'd love to know what that course involves. Didn't get any notable qualifications in school, though. Was too busy making videos. When I told the career teacher what I wanted to work in television, they sent me to radio rentals. Yes, there we are. That was Sean's Gardening World. And I remember I went to mime school, which is an unusual place for things to go, you know, doing the wall and all this sort of stuff and pulling invisible things. I went to mime school as part of my career. I didn't go to acting school, and I chose to go to mime school. Best thing I ever did, to be honest with you. But at the end of mime school, in Shepherd's Bush with Desmond Jones, amazing teacher. There was only 20 on the course, and he would teach us, and some would drop off because they couldn't cope. But at the end of the course, people would go up to him and say, can we have some sort of qualification to prove that we've been here? And he had developed just a certificate, really, to say, yes, you've attended the course for however many weeks it was. And people would line up and get this qualification or this certification or whatever, certification to say we've been taught mime by Desmond Jones, whatever. And I didn't. And I remember Desmond coming up to me at one point and said, Richard, I noticed that you haven't come up for your certificate. And I said, what's the point? What is the point? I mean, you either can do it or you can't. It's you know, it's going up to somebody as a career and saying, oh, we want to book a mime artist for such and such, and go, well, here's my certification to say I went to mime school. I mean, either you can do it or you can't. You know, better for you to say, well, do a bit of mime, walk an invisible dog, do the wall, climb a ladder, whatever it might be. You know, show me whether you can do it. For me, that was the thing. A bit of paper to say I could do it or that I'd attended a class didn't mean I could still do it 10 years on. It's ludicrous. And for me, the same thing that GCSEs and all these O-levels and things, to say that I went to school, and when I was in my formative years as a young person, I was able to sit in a room, forced to sit in a room with no means to sort of look up on the internet the answers or anything. I had to retain certain things in my head. And I did it then But now, 10 years, 20, 30 years on, could I do the same? Could I retain that information I learnt as a kid? No, probably not. Probably forgotten everything, because mostly I've never used a lot of the things that they taught me. All these things in mathematics that I've never used since, or all the history that perhaps I cannot remember, the crop rotations in Canada that I've never given a second thought to since. I mean, I think the school qualifications is a complete nonsense, although I get the idea is there to try and measure you. But the measurement is you, isn't it? It's your ability. You're able to do it. Give somebody a try. Test them over a period of time. I mean, by employing them. Are they any good? No. Can't use anything. Can I train him up? Maybe. Possibly. If I can't train him up, sorry, we're going to let you go. Or we're going to recommend you something else. That would be my way of approaching things. But then, hey, I'm a backward idiot, so what do I know? Thank you for watching. I hope it's been of interest. Do you feel guilty if you can't work? Do you feel that you're unable to live with yourself? Do you feel that you're a rotten person if you can't get up and do stuff? Or do you embrace the fact that, I'm just ill, and so therefore I'm going to take it easy and I'm going to get myself better? What do you do when you're feeling rough? That's what I want to know. That's the question we're having today. Thank you for watching. Take care, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.